Good morning. I'm Glenn Lowry, Director of the Museum of Modern Art, and delighted to welcome you to this press briefing on Ocean of Images New Photography 2015. Before I engage in a conversation with Quentin Bajac, Chief Curator of Photography, and Roxana Makuch, Senior Curator in Photography, co-curators of this project, I just want to remind everyone that this exhibition was supported by the Wallace Annenberg Fund for Innovation in Contemporary Art through the Annenberg Foundation, by the William Randolph Hearst Endowment Fund, by David Deckman and Michel Mercure, by our own Contemporary Arts Council, and by Courtney Finch Taylor. And we're grateful to all of them for allowing us to engage in a project of this scale. New Photography is celebrating its 30th year. So I thought we might just start with a brief arc from what was initially a relatively modest-scaled series of annual exhibitions to what is today a very large or substantially larger exhibition, and wanted to get your thinking on both the impact the series has had over the last 30 years and why you decided to change the format from its usual inclusion of 3, 4, sometimes 5 photographers, artists, to the present almost 20 artists.
So that's a big question. That's a big question. The series was, it's true, launched 30 years ago by the then Chief Curator of Photography, John Sarkowski. And at that time, John had a very precise, very simple, and yet very ambitious idea, which was just to show the best recent achievements in contemporary photography. So that was a very basic, simple program that was really successful for 30 years. We invited approximately 100 artists, very international, with a lot of big photographers that are today well known and that had their first show, or nearly their first show, at MoMA at that time. But you know, when John started that series of exhibition in the mid-80s, the situation was completely different. You know, there were very few New York institutions that were dealing with photography. There were very few galleries where photographers or artists using photography could show their work. So there were very few platforms, and the photography that was showing in the first edition of New Photography was quite different. You know, that's more in the I would say classic tradition of black and white photography. So as time goes by, of course, the series changed. There were some great years, some less interesting years also. That's, I would say, the role of each series. But after 30 years, we thought that maybe that was a good time to slightly change the format. To slightly change the format because I would say that we stick to what was the first goal of John Sarkowski and the department at that time in the 80s, that is, to still show the best achievements in recent photography. But the times have changed. You know, there are other institutions in New York that deal with photography. You know that there are many galleries that also propose shows that could be compared to New Photography, and that also that photography has changed a lot. It got bigger. It moved away from what I would call its traditional definition and forms. So it was probably time. It was probably time to reformat New Photography, to offer to the show a more floor space, to have it probably a little more international also than it used to be, to try to open to Asian, African artists and photographers, and also to maybe change the pace, to make it more like a biennale. I know that I don't want to use this term because I think that a lot of institutions have a biennale, but it's true that technically speaking, it will take place every 2 years, so it is a biennale.
Thank you, Quentin. I think that's the point that I really wanted to underscore, is that we are shifting from an annual program to one that takes place every other year. And the upside of that is that they'll be far more substantial in scale than they have in the past. But ocean of images, Roxana, what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I would like to add something to your previous question. And I think that it's true that the state of photography has changed, and it has changed since its inception. So our ambition is now not only to have a larger exhibition, and so I invite everyone to see the show which takes place throughout the Edward Steichen galleries, which sort of made it 4 or 5 times bigger than what it used to be. But also to go to the Bauhaus staircase and to the Agnes Gant sculpture garden platform, where several installations and in fact commissions by the museum are on view. So what is interesting about this edition, obviously it's the 30th anniversary, is also the fact that in conjunction with this edition, we have also launched a website of the live archive of the history of the New Photography exhibition series since 1985, so now with documents, with images. And also we have just published what is the 3rd book in a 3-volume series published in reverse, meaning from the most recent going backwards in history, so it's the 1960 to today, a history of photography through the museum's collection. And so within that volume, there are 44 artists who are represented in the New Photography series, so therefore they have real historic context within the history of photography and this history, in fact, of post-war to the present art. But Ocean of Images, first of all, has a title. It's not just New Photography 2015. We decided to give it a title, which means that it's a more curated exhibition. When it started with John was very much interested in presenting the most talented, the most adventurous practices that were happening at the time, and to do it at a very fast beat, to do it every year. But there were primarily artists whose practice may have had something in common or not. When we started working on this exhibition, so sort of the genesis of the show, started with our interest, our curatorial interest, in a group of artists that now came to be known as the post-internet generation. So what does that mean? What does the post-internet state of mind mean? Basically, it means any image, any cultural production that is produced with the consciousness of the system within which the picture exists. And the very title of the exhibition, Ocean of Images, sort of alludes to the internet as a vortex of images, as a site of piracy, as a network of informations and exchanges. And also, last night we had a panel discussion with a few of the artists included in the show, and Quentin mentioned to the liquidity, the kind of liquid intelligence, which is a sentence that comes from Jeff Wall, liquid intelligence of photography. And recently, the cultural historian Katja Silverman published a book, which in fact we hosted a presentation of her book here earlier this year at MoMA, which is called The Miracle of Analogy. And in that book, Katja goes back to the prehistory of photography, to the pre-photographic state, and talks about this unstoppably, in fact, developmental aspect of the photographic to the temporally morphing aspect of the photographic. And that leads me to say that not this liquid aspect or this liquid metaphor of the ocean of images has not only to do with the accumulation of images on the internet, but also with how today we look at images. We have a different approach in the way that we perceive and we analyze images than we had in the past.
One of the things I think that's striking about the artists who are included in the exhibition, and in fact the conversations that are circulating around them, is this issue of whether or not we're even talking about photography anymore. And one can look at that as a historian, I think, and think about the fact that photography has been changing almost from its inception. So the transition from a glass plate negative to a celluloid negative may have been a greater transition than from celluloid to digital. But it does call into question the relationship of the individual image to the moving image. And I wonder if you want to explore a little bit how some of the different artists have really tackled that problem in their work here.
All right. You will do it afterwards. I think that this exhibition deals indeed, Glenn, not with the death of photography. This is absolutely ridiculous. But it deals with the porosity of photography and with the fact that photography, as is practiced both by photographers and by artists working with the photographic medium, has indeed now is operating in an expanded field. Especially within this exhibition, where you see this kind of both analog and digital, online and offline, virtual and real, still and moving images coexisting. And many of the artists who are included in this exhibition, in fact, their images are born digitally. Some are made with lenses, some are made with scanners. Some of them are projections, some of them exist just on the website, some of them morph into three-dimensional objects. But what they all collectively do is that they bring an understanding that the word reality has a photographic face today, that the photography is has not only the capacity of replicating, of duplicating, of representing the word or depicting the word, but actually is a co-producer of reality and of the world in which we are. It's very possible that if we want an image, at a click of your mouse, you can, in fact, find it. And I think that this is a very important aspect, again, of this exhibition, to realize the fact that photography is producing reality and not just representing it. And the way that images circulate, and that has to do with the mobility, with the circulation or mobility of images, not only as moving pictures, but the way that they are being transmitted online and through various other type of viral systems.
You know, there's often the idea that we're entering or that we have entered into a kind of post-photographic age. That's a term that is often used and that I personally don't like. That was coined probably 30 years ago to describe that kind of internet of post-internet age, of photography in the internet of post-internet age. But I still think that we're dealing with photography, that is etymologically speaking, writing with light. Of course, the process is not the same. Of course, we're not using any chemicals anymore. It's not the imprint of light on a sensitive film. It's electronic captors that light which is encoded and translated into signals. But it's still etymologically speaking, writing with light. Having said this, you know, the attraction that moving image has had on photography has been going on for now nearly a century. You know, if you have a look at the text and a lot of the texts that were written, especially in Germany, in the 20s and 30s, and I think that the situation in Germany in the 20s and 30s and the reflections and discussions that occurred at that time around the photographic image can be really related to what's happening today. You know, Siegfried Kracauer, for example, was talking, as you mentioned yesterday, Roxana, about that kind of blizzard of images, the fact that they were also at that time, because of the photographically illustrated press, overwhelmed by that incredible amount of images. So they had already that feeling that we have today. And the Krakauer was also saying at the same time, in a very interesting text about an exhibition that he was visiting around film and photography, that he had the feeling that, so we're in 2930, that photography was already, and he says, an outmoded medium, because of its stillness, and he compares in a way photography to the railroad, and he says, but we're in a space age, and the space age is film.
Do you want to talk a little bit how you ended up with this particular selection of photographers, given the vast number who could have been in this exhibition, the process by which you winnowed it down to those who made it in?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that we worked with another curator, who is Lucy Gallon, who is an assistant curator in the photo department. And we work also with someone who was a curator at MoMA, who is Eva Respili, but who left MoMA in February. But we had also discussion with Eva, and Eva's input was also important in the way, and we selected the photographer. I think it was all important for us not to try to illustrate an idea, a thesis. The idea was not to make a statement and then to try to find a photographer that would kind of illustrate that statement. I think we all wanted to bring first the voices of the photographer and then to see how it looks. And I think it is a very open landscape that we have sketched in that exhibition with very different voices. So then we work together, of course, seeing works in New York, elsewhere, at fairs, at biennales, navigating a lot on the internet. I spend a lot online, looking from one website to another. I think that Roxana is more into biennale and fairs and going to the galleries. And also today we have a lot of, magazines, and so gathering this information, and sometimes probably not always having the same opinion. So having some discussions, and starting with a list of probably 250 artists or photographers that we then edited to 19. Do you want to add something, Oksana?
What I want to add is that actually the museum has a very interesting program that is called CMAP, which is Contemporary and Modern Art Perspectives in a Global Age, which allows curators to travel quite widely and do studio visits in various countries. And all the artists, all the 19 artists and collectives that are included in the exhibition, from Japan to Angola to Europe, various places in Europe, to Egypt. With all of them, we knew the artists in person, we've seen the work, and with most of them, we had conducted studio visits in their places. So that always happens, and the way that we do research, as Quentin mentioned, goes from anything from an Instagram to the most complicated scholarly books.
Anything goes.
I mean, anything goes. We are using all the tools, from digital media to the very analog ones, to get information about the artist. And we always look. We absolutely are right now looking for what will happen in 2017. We already are gathering a list of artists, meeting with people, engaging with artists. We are following what they are doing, and then when time comes, in a year and a half from now, we're gonna start and discuss around the table and bring our common conjoint knowledge, and try then to come to a more cogent idea about the exhibition. And that's what happened now. I think that one thing that New Photography has always done was obviously presenting some of the most important practices at a given time, but also charting the sort of evolution of photography, its social and cultural characteristics, and also more recently, its complicated, complex relationship to other media. We just talked about still and moving pictures, as well as the various roles that it has.
Thank you, Roxana. Let me turn this over to you in case there are any questions that you might have. Please, here.
Art magazine in Prague, among others. I have a question, obviously, excuse me, a generational question. I wonder how photographers who previously worked in more traditional photography, how they work today. You chose almost all I think all the photographers you chose are born between 1965 and 77. And have you looked at any photographers that are of an older generation and sort of bring that and also, of course, live in today's world today?
Well, I have the feeling that I was saying before that we have a very open landscape in the exhibition, and I was mentioning the expression anything goes. Anything goes could be probably a good expression for what's happening today, because I have the feeling if you have a look at the photographers that are included in the exhibition, they work in many different directions and using many different techniques. You know, they photograph, they scan, they use digital, but also they use analog, and they mix in very different ways. I have the feeling that they don't, of course, feel that digital is a threat, which was probably true for the previous generation. I have the feeling that the generation who is now, I would say, in the 50s or 60s, had a difficult time with the transition from analog to digital. I think that that generation, that is the generation that is represented in the exhibition, that are in their, I would say, 30s and early 40s, has no problem with that. Has no problem with that. Has no problem, of course, with digital, but has no problem with coming back to analog if necessary. And they like mixing, and they mix in very interesting ways, and they don't think that what they're doing has necessary to be called photography, which is also important. For example, when you ask Lucas Blaylock, who uses camera and also software, who mixes analog and digital, he always says that his practice is more closely related to drawing than photography. But yes, it is, technically speaking, photography.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Hi, just to follow that question, would somebody in their 60s be disqualified from new photography because of their age or generation?
No. In fact, we had in the past Bertine van Manen, who was shown here. She must have been in her late 50s or early 60s in new photography. So there have been a few, not often, but instances where an artist who didn't have visibility before was included in a new photography exhibition. But there are so many different types of exhibitions at MoMA in which we include photographers and artists working with a photographic medium. And that can be collection rotations, they can be thematic shows, monographic exhibition, focused shows, more survey-like exhibitions. So artists that are more mature in their careers, they have other opportunities to be represented. So in a way for us, we started from the work and we realized that there was a commonality between these artists, and that brought us to investigating this kind of so-called post-internet phenomenon, which is, again, as we talked, it's not as new, that there have been there is a history, there is a genealogy for what is happening today. Quentin just mentioned Siegfried Krakauer, the Blizzard of Images, and of course, Wilhelm Flusser, who is another theoretician. In 1983, years, like a few years before the before the launching of the World Wide Web, he also kind of analyzed what was happening at that moment and realized that in the history of human civilization, there have been two paradigmatic changes, and one occurred primarily about in the second half of the second millennium before Common Era, and that had to do with the invention of linear writing. And the second one is what we are witnessing now, and that has to do with the invention of technical images. So we wanted to address, precisely this this sort of shift from the linearity of writing to the dimensionality of the photographic, and show to what a degree today, you cannot, in fact, understand the world unless you understand cinema, unless you understand photography or three-dimensional animation or different forms of still and moving pictures. So it had a very clear, it became a very clear thematic or thesis for the show.
So yes, you can be a new photographer and yet be old or over 50. That's not old, but over 50. Yes, you can be a new photographer and use old processes. There's no, I would say, technological determinism, definitely.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. The line between film and photography is becoming more blurry and blurry, and you guys were mentioning that you included video, and I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that. What is considered now like a still image, or what's considered a moving image, and how that's changing all the time with the ascension of video and the internet.
Well, I think we had that panel yesterday with a few of the artists represented, and we were, not surprised because we knew that they were all talking about picture making, image making, and very seldom about photography or about photograph or about using photographic terms. So this is, of course, what photography is about today. It has definitely entered into, I would say, the image world. It's part of that image world, but in a way, the fact that that shift from analog to digital makes, in a way, obvious that it was always in the image world, and that right, I would say, from its inception, right from the 1840s, 1850s, it had strong relationship with other mediums, from painting to drawing, and there were all that kind of retouching, manipulation that could be also compared to what's happening today. So I think we're more talking about image making, and I think that has to do with the fact that new generation or young generation, that is all these photographers in their 30s or early 30s or 40s, are not interested anymore in that kind of ontological question about that specific relationship that photography would have had with reality, with recording fact, etc. For them, it's taken for granted that photography can be used in many different ways, and that yet it can still record the real, and it can be used in that way. But it can be also used for different purposes, like drawings and image makings, and mixed with videos. And they're both complementary, and they're not exclusive of each other.
Do you want to add anything to that?
I just want to add that, in fact, again, since the very beginning, since the 1830s, since the inception of the photographic medium, I think that its practitioners came, as they had to come at that time, from different parts. They came from science. If you think of Talbot, they came from cinema of sorts, or magic, with a diorama, with Daguerre. They came from, painting and sculpture with Rodin or Brancusi, who are using the photographic medium, or painting with Negre and Fenton and others. So, it is a medium that is very prone to having a more dialogical also relationship with other mediums, and right now it's contaminating everything. So
Any more questions? If not, thank you, Roxana, and thank you, Quentin, for a great discussion, but even more importantly, a very provocative and powerful exhibition.